first things first, Happy New Year. And secondly, is 60 frames per second worth the upgrade on the Sony A7 IV? So welcome back to my second video, breaking down the Sony A7 IV's video features. And in my last video we broke down the Sony A7 IV's 4K 30 frames per second mode. For what it's worth, I felt like the 4K 30 when used in the right circumstances works really great, and it looks great. I think the biggest trade-off, however, is that rolling shutter that we talked about in the last video. Thankfully though, it's a problem you can overcome with some good planning, like an effective shot list and stabilization techniques like a gimbal. So the reason I'm bringing up the rolling shutter is because I feel that the 60 frames per second mode actually reduces the rolling shutter by a decent amount. So here's an example of the 4K 30 rolling shutter versus 4K 60 rolling shutter. You can see that the rolling shutter looks so much better. However, this 4K 60 mode does come with the trade-off, the crop. I'm pretty sure you guys have heard about this mode already through various different YouTube videos, the 4K crop mode in 60 frames per second. And ultimately that's the big question, is it worth the upgrade despite its trade-offs? So as a freelance fashion photographer and videographer, I depend on my camera to create a lot of fashion campaigns. And I'm filming on the A7 III right now, and I've got to say I've been pretty spoiled with the full frame capabilities of the A7 III, because it means when I use my lenses I always get the full range of that lens's focal length. And that comes in really handy, especially if you're a huge fan of ultra wide angles like I am. I love using ultra wide angles in a lot of my fashion work because it helps me showcase the eye-catching locations that complement the styling. And it's only thanks to the full frame capabilities of the A7 III that I was really able to capture all of my subjects and the surroundings in really creative ways. So when I got my A7 IV, my biggest worry was that I would lose the ability to, especially in that 4K 60 mode, create those stunning full frame visuals. And to a degree, I did. The crop factor in the 4K 60 mode is a 1.5 times crop. So if this is what full frame looks like, then this is what 1.5 times crop looks like. It's a big difference. So in today's fashion campaign video, a big focus is on the streetwear bags that we're filming, and I just decided to go all in on the crop mode and just see if it would hold me back, my creative abilities. Does the crop make any difference in real world use at all? And what I mean by that is, if you're someone who shoots in really large open spaces, whether it's indoors or it's outdoors, I think you'll be just fine, even with the crop mode. I even went a step further, and instead of using my Tamron 17 to 28mm, which I'm currently using right now, I decided to use a little bit of a tighter lens, which was a Tamron 28 to 75mm. Now, I have to say that I didn't have much issue covering my ground outside. I just had to be a little bit more spatially aware, take a few more steps back, recompose my shots with a bit more thought and planning. And as I mentioned before, the rolling shutter in the 4K 60 is vastly improved. No more jello effect, you can actually get a little creative with your fast motion panning shots. But let's be honest, the real reason you want to upgrade to this camera is for the 4K resolution and that buttery smooth 60 frames per second. And so in the last video I mentioned that the Sony A7IV's 4K 30 is oversampled from 7K, giving it one of the sharpest 4K quality. Well, even in the 4K 60 you're oversampling from 4.8K, giving you still a nice bump in 4K sharpness and resolution. And when you combine that with the 60 frames per second and the upgrade in 10-bit 422, everything just has so much more depth. And if you don't believe me, see for yourself. Now, I've said a lot of good things about this camera for videography, but who isn't this camera for? Well, if you're an indoor video shooter, like weddings, or live events, or music, shooting cars in garages, basically anything that involves working in confined spaces, then this crop may not be useful for you. Taking a few steps back might not be an option, or even your widest lenses may not guarantee the right framing in a 1.5 times crop. Maybe your video content needs more than 60 frames per second for even more slow motion? Whatever the case may be, you just have to be realistic when considering this camera as an upgrade. For me, it was worth the upgrade from the A7 III, especially for the 10-bit video and the bump in resolution. But that doesn't mean it's the most ideal camera for everyone's requirements. Having said that, you just need to ask yourself those questions. What kind of job do you do? Is this camera going to be effective in your field of work? And with that, thanks so much for checking out this video. I hope I've given you some food for thought about the 4K 60 mode on the Sony A7 IV. And I still think there's a lot more to talk about this camera for both video and photography that I just have not broken down yet. And in the next video, hopefully I'll be breaking down some more video features and some more photography features, like the stabilization features on this camera, how does the in-body stabilization compare with the gimbal, or maybe low light tests. And if you love photography, then I also plan to do a breakdown of the new photography features and upgrades. So if you're interested in exploring this camera's capability with me, then don't forget to hit like, subscribe, hit that notification bell for a new video each week. Thanks so much again for tuning in, and I'll see you guys on the next one next week.